3 sinister and spine-chilling true stories of home intrusions that expose hidden nightmares. The darkness crept in as Julia returned home from another grueling shift at the diner. The weight of her exhaustion sank deep, but a gnawing sensation clawed at her insides. She dismissed it, embracing the familiar sounds of the suburban evening, the distant laughter of neighbors, the rustle of leaves in the autumn breeze. But unease lingered, like a shadow waiting to pounce. It started softly, a faint scratching sound at the windows, almost like tiny claws, probing. The wind, she told herself. Nothing to worry about. Right, as days turned to weeks, the mundane became unsettling. Flickering lights emanated from the basement, casting eerie shadows on the staircase. Julia's heart raced each time she thought of venturing down those steps alone. And just last night, shadows slid past her windows, dark and darting under the silvery moonlight. Her hands trembled as she tucked her children in, kissing their foreheads. Were they safe? A sinking dread settled in her stomach. Of course. There was Mr. Wilkins, the neighbor with the charming smile and a talent for appearing just when help was needed. But who was he really? Something about his collection of odd trinkets rubbed her the wrong way. The laughter of her kids echoed in her mind. Memories of toys they lost, eerie echoes of dolls and action figures that looked suspiciously similar to those in his front yard. Was she being paranoid? Yes, she hoped. But one stormy night, a silhouette flickered through her bedroom window. Time froze. Julia's breath quickened. Panic clenched her heart as she peered into the darkness, nothing but the quiet thrum of her anxious thoughts. Was someone watching? She thought it a trick of her imagination until she heard the relentless scratching again. Far more persistent this time. This wasn't the wind. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Julia felt her stomach drop, clutching her phone tightly as dread filled her veins. Was now really the time to worry about notifications? That sensation of claustrophobia hung thick in the air, weighing down her heart. She had to face Mr. Wilkins. She steeled her resolve and marched over, confronting him about the bizarre collection of junk that looked all too familiar. His smile stretched tight, shadows dancing across his face in the dim light. He evaded her questions with practiced ease, and the conversation turned nervous. His eyes flickered in a way that sent shivers racing down her spine. Then she heard whispers through the semi-darkness one late night, a garbled mix of laughter and downright creepy phrases from just beyond Mr. Wilkins's yard. Her heart raced as she imagined her children blissfully unaware of the horror that ebbed and flowed around them. Home. A safe harbor, yet she now understood. Safety is often just a facade. As she nestled her kids closer to her, the scratching at the window returned louder, more insistent than before. Julia's chest tightened, her mind spinning with frantic thoughts. Who could she trust? A sudden violent crash shattered the unnerving silence of her house. In that moment, her instincts flared to life. Fear gripped her. As she rushed toward the sound, a chilling revelation clawed at her brain. The intruder may not be a stranger after all. The living room was nearly dark, the moon casting long shadows that played tricks on Julia's mind. Her heart pounded as she stepped cautiously into the space, breath hitching in her throat. That crash had come from the kitchen, just beyond the doorway. She hesitated, caught between instinct and terror. A low, guttural sound echoed from within, snapping her out of her daze. "Kids," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Stay in your room." A bitter dread clawed at her gut. What if it was one of them? What if they weren't safe? With each creaking floorboard beneath her feet, every tiny sound amplified, it felt as if the house was holding its breath. The air thickened, suffocating her with fear. She swore she heard a soft, almost playful giggle slicing through the eerie atmosphere. Her skin crawled. "Stop this!" she shouted, surprising even herself, as she flipped on the kitchen light. The brightness burned her eyes, revealing the aftermath of chaos. Chairs had toppled over, and a glass lay shattered on the tile. But no one was there. Julia's pulse raced. An overwhelming sense of vulnerability washed over her. Then it hit her phone. She needed to call for help. But her fingers trembled as she fumbled for her purse. It wasn't there. Where had she left it? A fleeting movement caught her eye, a shadow flitting through the hallway, vanishing quicker than she could rationalize. Julia's heart dropped and she edged forward, feeling the hair on her neck prickling. "Who's there?" she demanded, hoping for a response. Silence. Just the low thrum of her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Julia reached the hallway, peeking around the corner. There was still no one. The door to the basement stood ajar, the faint flickering light spilling into the hallway. The basement. The one place she'd never dared to go alone even on the safest of days. But now it seemed like the only place left where she hadn't looked. A deep, gnawing fear urged her to run, but curiosity pulled her closer. What secrets lurked in the dark? Her legs felt like lead as she approached the stairs, dampening the echo of her footsteps as she descended into the gloom. Each step made her stomach twist tighter. The air was damp and musty, thick with the scent of mildew. At the bottom, the flickering bulb above cast strangely dancing shadows across the walls. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back. The scratching sound had grown louder now, accompanied by a sickening whisper, so soft she almost couldn't make it out. It sounded like her children, but twisted, unreal. "Mommy, help!" Her breath caught at the sound. Julia could barely move. Was it really them? "Answer me," she shouted, her voice shaking. "Is someone there?" She took a cautious step, then another. Suddenly the whispers stopped. Silence enveloped her, drumming in her ears. Adrenaline surged. She turned to bolt back up the stairs, but froze as a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was Mr. Wilkins. A twisted smile crept across his face, eyes gleaming with a malevolence she had only begun to recognize. "Looking for something, Julia? You shouldn't have come down here." Panic surged as she stumbled back, her mind racing. "What do you want? Where are my kids?" He let out a slow, raspy laugh. "Oh, they're just playing with my toys." Her heart felt like it would shatter. One thought screamed louder than the others. She had to escape. As she darted past him, the whispering returned, echoing through the basement, her children's names mocking her. Julia had to know the truth. But what lay ahead was far worse than she could imagine. The door slammed shut behind her. Trapped. And the scratching began again, louder, powerful, insistent. What awaited her now? The dark couldn't hide forever. The scratching became frantic, each noise tearing through the silence like a wail echoing from the pit of despair. Julia's breath quickened, falling into a panicked rhythm as she looked around, desperate for an escape. Mr. Wilkins loomed behind her, a grotesque stain against the dim light. Her skin prickled with his presence, suffocating in the chilling dark. "Let me out," she screamed, scrambling toward the door, but it held fast as if it were alive, resisting her frantic pleas. Was he laughing? The sound split through her thoughts, mocking her with every heartbeat. "They love to play hide and seek," he murmured, his voice slithering through the air like smoke, curling around her. "Stop it," she shouted again, but the words felt weak, swallowed by the shadows. Julia pressed her back against the cold wall, searching for anything, a tool, a weapon, a chance. The whispers grew louder, transforming into a chorus of her children's voices, distorted and haunting. "Mommy, where are you?" They echoed from behind the walls, from under the floor, growing closer and closer. The darkness closed in, and she felt herself teetering on the edge of insanity. Julia's instincts ignited as she turned to face Mr. Wilkins. "Tell me where they are. What did you do?" Her throat burned, but defiance surged through her veins. She wasn't going to let him control her fear. His smirk deepened, shadows dancing across his face. "They're just having so much fun, just like you are now." He stepped closer, the light flickering above, casting his distorted shadow across her. Fury ignited within her. "You think this is fun? You're sick." With a sudden surge of adrenaline, She lunged for the door again. But it was no use. Her hands fumbled against the unyielding surface. A sickening laugh bubbled from behind her. Playtime is just beginning, Julia. You'd hate to miss it. She whirled around, ready to confront him. But something far worse caught her eye. The shadows around the basement shifted, morphing into grotesque figures, dark and contorted. They moved closer, each one whispering her name, her children's names, each voice layered over the other, building an agonizing crescendo. "Mommy, are you coming to play?" The voice was sweet, childlike but twisted, sending ice through her veins. Panic seized her, and she stumbled back from the figures as they emerged, solidifying from the darkness a lunging mass of her greatest fear come to life. Julia kicked out, adrenaline fueling her as she pushed off the wall and finally slammed against the door again, shouting for it to open. "Help! Someone help me!" "SHHH," Mr. Wilkins hissed, stepping closer, eyes ablaze with a twisted glee. "Let them find you." A blinding spark flickered in the darkness, a glimpse of hope as the basement door rattled violently, catching her attention. Could someone be there? "Let me out!" She screamed again, desperation rising as the ground rumbled beneath her feet. It was a vicious, palpable fear that gripped her heart, a pulse she could feel in her bones. As if in response, the door creaked open just slightly, casting a sliver of light. But it was still too far, and behind her, the whispers grew louder, threatening to overwhelm her sanity. Every instinct screamed for her to run. She couldn't look back. With every ounce of resolve, Julia charged toward the door, the shadowy figures clawing at her heels, their whispers mingling with the pounding of her heart. She lunged for the crack, pulling with every fiber of her being, willing it to give way, praying for light, for escape. Would she break free, or would the shadows drag her into oblivion? The grip of darkness tightened, and she could feel it, a chilling promise that this wasn't over. The crack widened, a dim glow spilling into the suffocating dark. Hope surged within her, heating her cold flesh, igniting her desire to escape. But the shadows thickened, hissing, "No, not yet." Every whisper felt like ice slicing through her thoughts. The twisted figures clawed at her legs, their fingers slimy and cold, dragging her back as if nature itself conspired to keep her from freedom. She kicked blindly, feeling the rush of air as she fought to pull herself through the opening. "Let me out!" Julia screamed, every ounce of her strength stored in that cry. She knew every sound reverberated in that basement, blending into a cacophony of terror. For a heartbeat, the figures hesitated. Just a moment, but it was enough. Julia seized it. Gripping the edge of the door with white-knuckled fists, she yanked harder, feeling the resistance start to give. A splintering crack echoed through the air, her heart racing like a wild animal. Light flooded her vision, illuminating her savior's arms stretched out, waiting. But as she seemed to inch closer, Mr. Wilkins surged, his face twisted into a snarl. "What a shame," he spat. "You're so close." With a force like a tidal wave, he pushed her back, the weight of despair anchoring her to that dark pit. In that moment, the shadows laughed, wicked and hungry. Just when she thought she was lost, a primal scream erupted from deep within her, a sound pure and raw. It resonated with fear and rage, compelling the very air to vibrate. The shadows hesitated, startled for a fraction of a second, and then she lunged forward, her body crashing against the door with an unforgiving thud that it gave way. She tumbled into the light, but freedom felt like a mirage. The basement door slammed shut behind her with a heart-stopping finality. Breathless, she scrambled to her feet, gasping in the hallway, but the shadows loomed just beyond the door, seething and swirling, ready to consume her whole. "Mommy," the voices floated just beyond the wood, mocking her, teasing her, wrapping more tightly around her mind than the darkness ever could. Julia stared at the door, its grain worn and cracked, a barrier that felt like it could give way at any moment. A loud bang rang out, as if the figures were charging against it, desperate to break through. "No! Stay away!" she shouted, her voice trembling with fear. She turned toward the stairs, the bare bulb overhead flickering ominously. Each step felt heavy, as if the house was alive, pulling back, and snaring her. There were no voices in the house, only the eerie stillness of a nightmare paused. She felt the weight of a million eyes watching, waiting for the right moment. The air thickened, and she realized she was not alone. With shaking hands, she gripped the railing and began to ascend, feeling the chilling presence behind her, creeping, watching with every step. As she reached the landing, the whispers blared, drowning her thoughts in a symphony of terror. She stumbled into the living room, locking the door behind her. Her heart raced as she spun around, searching for something to defend herself with. The sanity of the world outside felt so far away, tainted by the horror that clung to her skin like a twisted shroud. And then she saw it, a reflection in the cracked mirror, blurry and shifting. In that moment, a thought screamed through her mind. Maybe something was inside the walls of her own home after all. She had always ignored the warning signs, hadn't she? Suddenly, the lights flickered again, plunging her into darkness. A chuckle echoed from behind her, low and sinister, the sound curling around her throat like a noose. She whirled around, heart pounding, breath hitching. "What do you want?" she gasped, the shadows closing in again. But before any reply could reach her, the front door burst open with a force that shook the room, revealing nothing but a chilling gust of wind and the full weight of the night. "Welcome home." Yet something flickered behind the shadows at the door, a movement. A figure standing in the corridor. What had she let in? Was her family still out there, or had the nightmares finally come to claim their own? The terror of that thought rooted her in place as the unmistakable sound of giggling echoed in the dark. The giggling twisted through the air like a knife, sharp and taunting. Julia's heart raced as she stepped back instinctively, her pulse echoing through her ears. The figure at the door loomed larger, distorted by the flickering light, and she sensed something deeply wrong. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. Instead of a reply, the giggling morphed into a chorus of whispers. Joy and pain welcome, each word was a dagger, stabbing through the silence of her dread. She fumbled backward, her back colliding with the wall, cold and unforgiving. Was this her mind playing tricks? No. She could feel the heat of the figure, a palpable presence that defied the darkness. The lights flickered again, and for a split second, she glimpsed a face, pale, hollow cheeks and eyes too big and black, staring with insatiable hunger. Julia's breath hitched, the air thickening like molasses, suffocating her in sheer terror. "What do you want?" she managed to whisper again, dread pooling in her stomach like poison. Whatever it was wanted something, and she feared it was more than her sanity. Every spine-chilling story she had ever heard rushed back. You let something in, and it could take everything. The laughter grew louder, echoing off the walls, drowning her in a wave of dread. Pushing against the wall, she turned on her heel and sprinted towards the kitchen, desperately hoping to find something, anything she could use to defend herself. The cold tiles chilled her feet as she raced in, heart pounding like a wild drum. She grabbed a knife from the block, its stainless steel glinting dangerously. Clutching it tightly, she felt absurdly small as she prepared to face an unknown terror. The kitchen suddenly felt alien, shadows pooling in each corner, twisting into grotesque shapes. Footsteps echoed behind her, soft yet deliberate. Was it her imagination, or had the shadows taken a shape of their own? She whirled around, expecting to find menace, finding only darkness. But as she peered into the void, a flicker of movement caught her attention, a glimpse of a small figure darting past the doorway. "Mommy!" The voice rang out again, and it was unmistakably her daughter's. Julia's heart twisted, hope battling with her instinct to flee. Was it really her child, or a cruel trick designed to torment her? "Emily?" she called, voice breaking. The figure appeared again, retreating further into the shadows, but still she heard the sinister laughter that accompanied it. Trembling, Julia took a tentative step forward. "Please, where are you? Let us go home." A breath of wind brushed against her, cold and mocking, and she could feel the walls closing in. Shadows shifted, seemingly alive, and she turned back toward the kitchen. She could just barely make out more laughter. A chorus of chilling giggles melding with Emily's name. Would it never end? Despair seeped in, knotting her insides. If the darkness could speak, it would say this was her fault. Wouldn't it? She had ignored the signs, always brushing them aside as childish imagination. What awaited her in the pitch-black corners? Suddenly, the lights buzzed back to life, illuminating the room. Everything returned to its mundane state, but Julia felt the weight of the shadows still closing around her heart and the silence. She heard it again, the soft giggle of a child. "Mommy, come play." Her breath quickened. She raced toward the sound, every ounce of her being pushing her to the door that led deeper into the heart of her home. What would she find? Was it truly her child or something monstrous wearing her daughter's face? As she reached the threshold, the world around her pulsed with anticipation, and then she stopped, fingers brushing against the doorknob. Uncertain of what would wait beyond her worst fears or an essential truth, the sounds behind her escalated again, overwhelming her with shrieks of laughter, drowning out her sense of reality. What kind of game had she stumbled into? A game where she could lose everything. Would she dare to open the door? Julia's hand curled around the doorknob, the cool metal anchoring her racing thoughts. She could feel the vibrant energy thrumming in the air, like the moments before a storm, the heavy silence holding its breath. Deep down, a primal instinct screamed at her to turn away and run, but the giggle echoed enticingly in her ears. It was like a siren's song, beckoning her to the abyss. "Emily!" she called again, her voice cracking with desperation. She pushed down the doorknob, letting the door creak open just a fraction. The darkness beyond swallowed the light, a tangible void that made her skin prickle. In that moment, she caught a whiff of something rotten, a scent that crawled from the depths of her childhood nightmares. It was more than eerie. It was foul. The laughter morphed into wailing shrieks that tore at her sanity. Steeling herself, Julia shoved the door open wider, heart racing as dread surged anew. "Mommy!" came the voice again, now tinged with a sing-song quality that sent chills down her spine. She took a tentative step into the thick shadows, knife raised, ready to confront whatever lied ahead. And as she entered, the door slammed shut behind her with a resounding bang, slicing off her escape. The air grew denser, wrapping around her like a suffocating shroud. The whispers escalated again, echoing against the walls, as grotesque figures began to swirl in her peripheral vision. They twisted and morphed shapes of children, distorted forms that resembled her daughter but were undeniably wrong. Their mouths stretched wide, forming grins too large for any human. "Come play," they squealed in unison, their voices a sickening mixture of joy and malice. Panic surged within Julia. She took a step back, clutching the knife like a lifeline, the blade reflecting the swirling forms that danced just beyond her reach. "Stay away from me," she screamed, voice swallowed by the oppressive darkness. The figures darted forward, eyes glistening like obsidian, their hands clawing toward her. The sickly sweet smell intensified, while rising in her throat. Just when she thought she would break, something tugged at her mind. The memory of the old treehouse in their backyard flared, Emily's laughter ringing through summer afternoons. That was real. The laughter, the innocence. The shapes before her were lies, manifestations of her terror. "Emily!" Julia shouted, and the wave of darkness hesitated, as if struck. A moment of stillness washed over the room. "Find me!" The voice echoed clearer now, an enchantment in the chaos. Julia steadied her breathing, pushing the blade forward, willing it to pierce the illusions. With a surge of defiance, she lunged at the nearest child shape, the knife slicing through the void and plunging into nothingness. A shriek of frustration echoed around her, and for once, the laughter faltered. It felt like a victory, however fleeting. But the shadows recoiled only a moment before reforming, now angrier. "You hurt us!" they shrieked, and suddenly, the air turned frigid. Julia felt the essence of darkness seep into her bones, chilling her resolve. They lunged again, this time a whirlwind of grasping hands and sinister whispers. Julia backed away, her heart pounding fiercely as she sought an escape. If she could just find her daughter then. Through the chaos, she spotted a flicker of light in the distance, illuminating something almost tangible. Could it be? Emily, she called out again, pushing through the panic. Maybe this time, the call would pierce the veil of madness. But as she stumbled through the dark, the shadows tightened, closing in around her. Embrace the game, Julia, they taunted. We will be closer than ever. With her breath hitching in terror, she lunged toward the light, hoping to grasp hold of a reality that felt just out of reach. But the shadows raced after her, hungry and relentless, their laughter roaring like thunder. Would she reach the light before they dragged her down into the abyss? Despair clawed at her heels. The chase was on, a terrifying dance of light and dark, each heartbeat echoing and unrelenting. Question: was the light her salvation or another trap? The flicker of light seemed to pulse, guiding Julia forward like a beacon. But with every frantic step, the darkness surged with a dreadful intensity. It felt alive, hungry to consume her whole. You can't escape! The whispers hissed, circling her, wrapping around her like a noose. She fought against the rising tide of despair, clutching her knife tighter, her knuckles white with effort. She pushed forward, aware of the creeping shadows clawing at her ankles, pulling her back into the void. The light flickered again, revealing a small doorway at its center, ajar and shimmering. Hope ignited in her chest. Could that be an exit? Emily! She screamed, her voice strained, filled with raw desperation. I'm coming! But the figures, twisted remnants of childhood nightmares, darted in front of her. Their faces grotesquely happy, mouths stretching into an impossible grin. Join us! They cried, a chorus of torment that made Julia's stomach churn. Julia stumbled. The closer she got to the door, the more viscous the shadows became, swirling and lashing against her. Panic surged as icy fingers clawed at her back, tugging her, wrapping around her waist. She could feel the cold settling in like ice water, biting with every breath. As she neared the light, it transformed, shifting and growing, revealing a path beyond. She could almost see Emily's face glowing in the warmth, the innocence that had been missing for so long. Mommy! The dulcet tones clawed through the chaos, sharper than the shadows that clung to her and her heart. Julia knew she couldn't turn back now. This was a chance, a moment to escape the clutches of this hellish maze. Taking a deep breath, she surged forward. This ends now, she yelled defiantly. Just as she lunged for the doorway, a shadow lunged at her, arms outstretched as if to pull her back into despair. With one swift swing of her knife, she carved through the dark, the blade slicing through the air and finding purchase on what felt like flesh warm, but wrong. It let out a shriek, a sound that twisted her insides, deep and echoing. But the light flickered wildly, casting terrible shadows and making her doubt. The figures froze for a heartbeat, their eyes narrowing, seeking her weakness. You think you can take her? They hissed, voices slithering through the air. You'll find she belongs to us. And with that, the shadows bubbled and erupted, swirling thick about her, forming a wall of confusion, making her lose sight of the flickering light. Julia's heart raced, her mind swelled with agonizing thoughts. Emily's face, the one she fought so hard for, was slipping, fading into the encroaching darkness. She was losing it all, her fury igniting into desperation. What must she sacrifice to save her daughter? The shadows conspired around her, a cacophony of laughter and cries, drowning out her swirling thoughts. I won't let you take her. I'll fight. Julia screamed, forcing her way once more toward the light, each step a battle against the gnawing despair. Then silence. The laughter dissolved into a whisper, and the shadows parted temporarily, revealing the doorway. Julia blinked, breathless. Was this her moment? With one last effort, she sprinted toward the opening, but just as her fingers brushed the edge, the darkness twisted again. You cannot escape that easily, it murmured, slick and venomous. The game has only just begun. A thunderous crash echoed as the shadows lurched forward, grasping, pulling, overwhelming. Julia felt herself being dragged into the chaos, her scream swallowed by the cacophony, the knife slipping from her fingers. What awaited her now, deeper within the abyss? Would she ever find Emily again? And was the light truly a way out, or merely an illusion, a cruel trap waiting to consume her? As the darkness closed in, her last thoughts lingered not on escape, but on the chilling promise that echoed in her mind. The game has only just begun. The weight of the shadows was crushing. Julia felt the cold seep into her bones, and for a moment, time suspended. The laughter faded, replaced by a haunting silence, broken only by her labored breathing. Every heartbeat pulsed in her ears, echoing the urgency of her situation. She was entangled in nightmarish whispers with no escape in sight. Then, in a blink, the world shifted. The doorway shimmered again, illuminating her surroundings with an eerie, almost otherworldly glow. Was it a mirage? She could see the glimmer of her knife lying just beyond the threshold. But was it worth the risk? A shudder of doubt filled her. Emily. The name rolled off her tongue like a prayer. A desperate whisper clawed from her throat. If she could just make it to the door, maybe, just maybe, she could reach her daughter. But the shadows seemed to pulse with life, muscles rippling, hungry for her despair as she lunged forward. The walls of darkness writhed like worms, slithering closer, bulging and convulsing. She can't be saved, they shrieked, voices tumbling over one another in a dissonant symphony of madness. She is part of us now. No, Julia screamed, her voice raw with intensity. She swiped at the looming shadows with her bare hands, feeling the bitter cold run through her veins like ice. The sensation was enough to snap her back to reality. She needed to push through, face whatever nightmares lay on the other side of the door. With one last surge of adrenaline, she dashed toward the doorway, heart knocking against her ribcage. Just as she reached for the edge, a tendril of darkness lashed out, catching her wrist in a vice grip. Panic flooded her senses. She struggled violently, her heart racing, her mind screaming for freedom. Join the others, Julia. A voice whispered sweetly, chillingly familiar. It was a voice that curled around her thoughts, igniting memories she had buried. A child's laughter, soft and innocent. You won't have to be alone anymore. The promise slithered into her mind, filling her with dread. It felt like a betrayal, a pull toward a cliff she had fought so hard not to fall from. Shaking her head frantically, Julia steeled herself. I won't let you take me. With another forceful tug, she yanked her arm free, leaving a cold sensation behind like a ghost's trace. Lunging through the door, she braced for impact, ready to face whatever lay ahead, be it freedom or another layer of torment. The moment she stepped inside, the cold morphed into an invasive warmth, as if she had crossed into another realm entirely. The space before her twisted and distorted, the walls peeling away like old paint. There was a dim, flickering light at the far end, pulsing in rhythm with her racing heart. She took a hesitant step forward, and suddenly, everything changed. Shadows rushed in, laughing maniacally as they blurred the lines between reality and nightmare. You can't escape our grasp, they chanted. Then, a break in the chaos. A familiar silhouette emerged from the shadows, small and vulnerable. Mommy! The voice pierced through the layers of haunting echoes, grounded in pure innocence. Julia's heart soared but twisted painfully at the same time. This was Emily, but something felt off. The glow around her did not feel real. Emily! Julia cried, desperation crawling up her throat. As she reached for her daughter, the light flickered ominously. The shadows screeched in protest, ripping apart the air like frantic banshees. No, she is ours now. A familiar chill swept through her, and dread pooled in her stomach. Was it Emily standing before her, or a cruel facsimile? How could she tell in this place of twisted reality? Mommy, the voice trembled, more delicate than she remembered. Julia felt her world tilting. Would she be able to discern the truth? Everything was crumbling around her, and time was running out. Is this real? She whispered, practically pleading. The shadows gathered around them, the laughter swelling to a deafening roar. Choose wisely. Julia, the game continues. Would she let the shadows consume her again? Or would she reclaim her daughter from this malevolent grip? In that moment, with the laughter echoing and the form fading in front of her, Julia realized the true battle had only just begun. Julia's heart thundered in her chest as the shadows closed in, laughter dancing on the edges of her sanity. The flickering light that illuminated Emily's form twisted, casting an ominous glow that shifted in rhythm to her fear. Was this a mother's instinct or a shadow's trick? Time ceased to matter, only the urgent need to protect her daughter. Mommy, the echo of that sweet voice pulled at her like a lifeline, yet it sent a shiver of doubt racing along her spine. Stay back, she exclaimed, raising her hands, a weak barrier against the onslaught of darkness. The light flickered again, revealing a face that mirrored Emily's, but was it truly her? The innocent eyes gazed back, but the smile felt empty, stretching too wide, too unnatural. Join us. A chorus of whispers chorused around her, intertwining with the sinister laughter. Fresh panic surged as she realized the shadows weren't just spectral, they were hungry. Leave her alone, Julia shouted, the words escaping her lips in a desperate burst. Her legs felt rooted, yet she fought against the urge to flee, to run from the nightmare stitching itself around her family. Suddenly, the warmth turned suffocating. A wave of heat rushed over her, wrapping its tendrils tighter. She felt lightheaded, her thoughts swirling like fog. The shadows started to seep into her skin, prickling at her consciousness, wrapping around her mind. Emily, if this is you, please. In that moment of sheer terror, a crack splintered in the darkness. A new voice emerged, edged with distortion. She's just like you, Julia. A part of us now without warning. The flickering light burst bright, illuminating grotesque forms lurking in the corners. Julia recoiled. An assembly of twisted figures gathered, their gnarled faces mimicking those she loved bending, breaking into macabre shapes. Run, Mommy, the Emily shadow cried, now laced with urgency. But Julia's heart sank. Could she trust anything in this place? As the shadows began to advance, the figure of Emily flickered, the warmth of its glow dimming. Julia gathered every ounce of resolve. Was the strength of a mother's love enough to defeat this horror? Get away from her, Julia cried, using the last of her energy to bolt forward. She reached for the fading form, every inch of her screaming that this was the real Emily, the one she cherished. But the shadows lunged at her, ripping through her resolve with their chilling wails. They swarmed around, forcing her to the ground. With a howl, she squinted through the murky chaos, searching desperately for any trace of her daughter. Mommy, save me, came the haunting plea, now echoing from many shadows, multiplying as if to sap her spirit completely. The weight of despair descended upon Julia, but in that instant of darkness, fighting for breath, she caught a glimmering knife nestled between the shadows, a promise of hope. With her last flicker of strength, she dove for it. The moment her fingers brushed against the cold steel, fire ignited within her veins. I will not let you take my child. The shadows hesitated, the laughter faltering. She stood, adrenaline surging, knife clenched in her hand. This was her weapon, her chance. Julia's eyes blazed with determination. Yet somewhere in the cacophony, amidst the chaos of laughter and despair, something shifted in the air. The shadows pulled back slightly, forming a shape that twisted and curdled, revealing a grotesque mockery of Emily's face. Mommy? It crooned softly, yet the underlying malice twisted the sweetness into something grotesque. Julia's heart seized. What if she found her daughter only to lose her all over again? What if she could never discern reality from the nightmare? Choose Julia. It whispered in a haunting tone, an invitation, a threat. The shadows surged forward, and with the knife raised high, Julia prepared herself for the final confrontation. The air crackled with tension, each heartbeat counting down to a reckoning she could neither foresee nor evade. Would she plunge into darkness to uncover the truth and save Emily, or would she join them forever lost in the shadows? Her heart raced as the knife trembled in her grip. The shadows lurked closer. Who would survive the choices ahead? The shadows tightened their grip, twisting the air around Julia, suffocating her like a nightmare made flesh. But in that moment, something flickered inside. The memories of laughter, warmth, and love for her daughter pierced the darkness like a beacon. She wouldn't let them take Emily, her flesh and blood, her heart. Enough, she shouted, fury coursing through her veins. Julia took a deep breath, steadying herself against the chaotic backdrop of voices and shadows. You want a game? Fine, let's play. With every ounce of willpower, she lunged forward, knife raised high. The glint of steel caught the flickering light, and as she swung, the shadows recoiled, their laughter becoming shrill and panicked. The knife sliced through the thick darkness, carving a path closer to the glimmering figure of Emily. "Mommy, help!" The child's voice was threaded with fear, pushing Julia onward. With renewed determination, she pushed through the shadowy tendrils, each slice of the knife cutting away the obscured terrors that had ensnared them both. "Get away from her!" she screamed, her voice a battle cry slicing through the chaos. The shadows writhed and shrieked, pulling back as the blade caught the essence of the darkness, severing the tendrils that had twisted around her. And then she reached Emily. The child stood, the glow of hope radiating in stark contrast to the suffocating black surrounding them. Julia wrapped her arms around her daughter, the warmth igniting a fierce courage that surged through both of them. "I've got you, baby," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. But, as they embraced, the grotesque forms circled closer. "You think you can take her?" they taunted, a sinister cacophony of echoes. "She will become one of us." The shadows lunged, but Julia was ready. Gripping Emily's small hand tightly, she rallied her strength. "Not if I can help it," she declared, spinning around to face the encroaching darkness. She felt a warmth radiating from her daughter that intertwined with her own fear, feeding a strength they both shared. Together, they pressed forward into the heart of the abyss. "Believe, Emily," Julia urged, her voice steady. "You have to believe in light. We can do this." As if infused with magic, the darkness hissed and recoiled. Julia brandished the knife in front of them like a shield. Focusing on the flickering light, a whisper of truth, she thrust the steel into the void. The blade carved a path forward, cutting through the swirling shadows like a needle through fabric. The laughter transformed into frantic howls of rage, echoing off the walls as they struggled to hold their ground, themselves standing in the familiar comfort of their living room. The sun streaming through the windows, banishing the remnants of darkness. In disbelief, they embraced tightly, warmth flooding over them. Julia could barely comprehend the overwhelming relief mingling with the aftermath of terror. And the days that followed, Julia kept her children close, cherishing every moment, every laugh, promising them safety, a vow forged in fire and fear. They would always be a family, and Julia vowed never to turn away from the signs again. As she looked out over her sunlit yard, Julia noticed the treehouse standing sturdy in the distance. It was a fortress of imagination, a symbol of clarity and hope. She smiled, heart swelling. This was not just a victory over darkness. It was a reminder to protect the light. "Mommy?" Emily's sweet voice broke her thoughts, grounding her once again. "Yes, my love? Can we play?" Julia laughed, lifting her daughter into her arms. "Absolutely. Let us play." And so, hand in hand, they stepped outside together, the bonds of love and hope brighter than ever before. This was their new beginning. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss out on the next heart-pounding stories that will chill you to your core. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm, you know it matters. Flood the comments below with your reactions and theories about this ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how this saga concludes. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.